Hello everybody. In this video I will show you how to create a repository for a Git repository for your project and create a remote one on GitHub and link your local one to the remote one and then push all your work to the remote, which is a way that we're going to start turning in assignments more frequently now, particularly large assignments. Although for this one you're going to be doing it for your homework. So step one is to create a GitHub account if you haven't already. So pause the video now and go to github.com and create an account if you haven't already. All right, now let's go ahead and create a new repository. I will call this one homework example. We'll make it public. If you want to add a description, throw away example. You can add your own description. This one, it's just going to be your homework assignment. Let's not add a git ignore file here. You're going to have your own created locally. And let's not add a license for now. So just keep everything the way it is. And click Create Repository. Okay, so here the HTTPS URL. This is the one that you're going to use to connect your local repository on your own computer to the remote, which is the GitHub one. So you can copy this. You can also come back to this later if you want. For now, let's go to IntelliJ. Okay, so here's my project. Mine is empty, but yours should have all of your work in it. If you haven't done so already, we want to make this into a local repository first. So we'd go to VCS, and we would say Enable Version Control Integration. You've done this once before, but I'm showing you all the steps again. Okay, so we're going to use Git, and click OK. And if you wait for just a minute, you should see a version control tab down here, which lets you see what's happening. If you remember what we have to do, we have to tell Git which of our files we want to actually track using the Git tool. Because we don't want to track all the files. We don't want to track files that are configuration files. So if you go to local changes and expand unversioned files are all the things that we're not tracking. And right now we're not tracking anything. So let's first create a git ignore file. If you have a plugin, you could create it automatically, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go up to the project and right click and say new file, and I'm going to name the file .gitignore. It's really important that you get this completely correct. So you start with a dot, there's no spaces, nothing is uppercase. And we can click OK, and it's asking me, do I want to add these files to Git? I do want to add gitignore to Git, but I don't want to add that. So let's unclick this box so it doesn't give us vcs.xml, and we'll click OK. Here it's asking me, do I want to add unversioned files to the gitignore file? And the answer is no, I don't. Okay, so the gitignore file is just a list of all the files or file patterns or directory names that we want to ignore. So I want to ignore anything that is inside. Well, let's look at the unversioned files. So these are the complete file paths to each of these files. So notice that a lot of these files, like miscellaneous.xml, exist inside a folder called .idea. So that's where IntelliJ keeps its configuration stuff. So I'm going to add .idea to the gitignore file because I want to ignore all of that configuration stuff. I'm going to hit Control S to save, and now you see that all of those have disappeared because I've told the gitignore file that I want to ignore them. So they're no longer counted as unversioned because I explicitly told it that we want to ignore them. All right, I also don't want this IML file, so let's also ignore star.iml. The star is just the multiplication character, and that's called a wildcard. It matches any sequence of characters. So I'm saying ignore anything that starts with whatever we want it to start with and ends with a .iml. So in other words, ignore .iml files. So again, I hit Control S to save, and now the only unversioned files are the ones that I'm interested in keeping track of. All right, so I'll close gitignore. Let's select both of those, and I'll right-click and say commit, which is making a snapshot. I'll call this initial commit. I do not want to perform a code analysis check. I do not want to check the to-dos, so I'll uncheck that. Everything else looks good, so I'll click commit. And now we've recorded a snapshot. Let's also commit the gitignore file, so I'll right-click and say commit. This one I'll say add git ignore, because that's what this snapshot is doing. I'm adding the git ignore file. I'll click commit. Great. So now everything is up to date. You can look inside the log to see these are the 2 commits that we have. And now I want to take this entire project and I want to push it to the GitHub remote. So to do that, we have to connect to the GitHub remote. And here's how you do that. You'll go to VCS and Git and Remotes. And now we're going to add a remote by hitting the plus. And origin is the usual name for a remote. And so now, do I still have it in my buffer? I do. So you want to paste your entire URL, starting with https://. So that entire thing. If you've lost that thing, then go back to your web browser here, and you can find it here. Be careful. If you have SSH selected, that's a different protocol that you're probably not set up to use. So make sure HTTPS is selected. All right. So finally, you're ready to push. What happens when you push is you're taking all of your commits that you've made and you're copying them to the remote repository. So the way you push is you go to the VCS menu, you go to Git, and you go all the way down to push. And it's going to tell, yours probably looks different from mine because I've already pushed once. Yours is going to probably have both commits that you've already, that you haven't pushed yet. But if you hit the push button, if all goes well, you should see a message pop up here that says push successful. It might ask you to type, or it probably will ask you to type in your user credentials, so your username and your password, and you should go ahead and do that. Okay, so if it's worked, you should be able to go to that same project, and if you refresh the page, you'll actually see all of your files here, because you've successfully pushed them. Your last step is going to be to go back to your, not that one. Go back to your project and hit the clone or download button and recopy this same URL for the HTTPS protocol. Copy this and paste it into the Google form that I have sent you. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to batch clone all of your projects and run my script to see that they all worked. Cool. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy your weekends.